everyone. My name is Kristen Libertor, and I'm a commercial strategist with IQVIA Digital. We're here today to talk about gaming. We're going to talk about what it is and who does it. We're going to talk about if pharma should lean in and why. We're going to dispel some myths about if 20-something males only game, if doctors game, if gaming is brand safe, and if it's measurable. So I'm going to start by turning it to my fellow panelists and having them share some of their gaming memories, please, as well as your favorite game. Kim?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Kimberly Jones from Butler Till. We're a marketing agency that specializes in media planning, buying, media technology in healthcare specifically. This was a fun kind of question. So what I have learned is I play games, but I don't necessarily consider myself a gamer, but I do have the early memories of Nintendo, and I'm probably dating myself just a bit. Anybody else in the audience remember Duck Hunt? Please, please, let there be somebody. Oh, yes, thank you, thank you. I'm not the only one in my generation.
Hi, everyone. Allison Tapia, former Senior Director of Performance Marketing and Digital Innovation at Dermavant, an Organon company. My favorite gaming memory also would be of the Nintendo generation, but I'm more in the Zelda Link camp, as well as Paperboy, so I see some heads nodding. I don't know that I would consider myself a gamer today, although I do a lot of it at work.
Hey everybody, I'm Dave Gluck from Unity. I would say my favorite game is Rocket League. I don't know if anybody plays that, but it's certainly a fun game. And my favorite memory is a new memory. My son is now 8, and playing EA FC with him and scoring goals on the same team is one of my favorite things to do.
So for reference, mine is the most cliche. It is Mario Kart. And my favorite memory is also recent with my children. My son has taken up Mario Kart as well, and he beat me for the first time the other day. And seeing the joy on his face was memorable for sure. So let's start with the definition of gaming. I'm actually going to turn to the audience for a moment. Can you guys help me understand what you think gaming is?
Not rhetorical.
Not rhetorical. I can hum the Mario Kart. Do, 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 do.
It's an interaction with, some sort of puzzle.
Any other ideas? So a traditional console, or can it be anywhere else? I think rewards are a big part of gaming for sure.
Serotonin.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm going to turn to our panelists. Dave, do you actually want to start? How do you define gaming?
I mean, gaming can be a lot, especially when we're talking about advertising and gaming. There's a world out there that is beyond just the mobile game or the console game. It includes streaming, influencers, all types of experiences that happen. So gaming can be more than just an interaction between a user and that video experience.
Yep. What about things that may or may not be classified as game, like gamification? Things like a smartwatch and steps. How do you guys feel about that? Do you feel like they're a game?
I was going to say, I think anytime you have something where there is a reward, I think that's a nice definition, where there's an opportunity to interact and engage with whatever it is, the content that you're trying to consuming, I think it's an opportunity for gaming. And I think in the context of advertising, it's a really interesting question, and I think maybe how this question was originally derived, because we were debating about what is gaming. Is it a tactic? Is it a channel? Is it a way of buying? And the reality is yes, yes, yes. I mean, you can consider gamers an audience. So it's an audience, it's a tactic, it's, you can buy it programmatically, you can buy it direct. In some ways, it's just like a display ad. And in other ways, it can be much, much more involved, and it creates an opportunity for advertisers to really have a connection with the audience that they're trying to reach.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think the other word I would use to add would be competition. And when I think about gaming, to me, it's just another touch point in the ecosystem where we're trying to reach our key customers.
Because there's so many ways to reach customers nowadays, right? So let's talk about who a gamer is. I'm actually going to turn to you guys one more time. Can I see a show of hands? Who in the room games? Okay.
Statistically, somebody's lying.
Yes. So let's actually talk about those statistics for a minute, Kim. It suggests that 190 million Americans, or about 6 out of every 7 game, if I lean into the 6 versus 7, 71% of Americans game in general at any point in time, and 61% game for more than 1 hour a week.
That's absolutely right. So I think across every single demographic, there are gamers, and it's fairly evenly split. I think if you look at the total population of gamers, the majority tend to be millennials, but it's not a huge majority. It's like 30%. But that differs when you're looking at the amount of time that people are spend with gaming. Gen Z definitely holds it there, but your average gamer is like 31, 32 years old. And yes, you're right. I think the average gamer spends something like 12 or 13 hours a week gaming, which to me does sound kind of like a lot, but if you think about the fact that 90% of games are played on your mobile device, and I don't know about any of you, but if you're sitting, I don't know, anywhere alone, anywhere, like you're waiting for somebody, maybe you're waiting for somebody at dinner, at the bar, you're either scrolling or you're gaming. Like nobody enjoys just the peace and quiet of sitting alone anymore. So if you take into account all of those situations, then I think the minutes and the hours add up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and let's lean in on the age part. You talked specifically about Gen Z.
Yeah.
The statistician in me was actually really interested when I looked at some studies. It seems that you're evenly distributed, less than 18, 18 to 34, and then 35 to 55, and even 13% of those older than 55 game as well.
Yep. And also pretty evenly split between men and women, which I think surprises
52 and 48%, yeah, I was actually quite surprised at that. The statistics also suggest across race. So 60 to 70% of adults who classify as white or black, Hispanic, and Asian consider themselves gamers. So what does that mean for the diversity of the audiences?
Well, it means from an advertising standpoint, it's an audience that you absolutely want to reach because everybody is represented when you're talking about gaming. And so for almost any advertiser, it is a very valuable audience to try to reach.
So Dave, I'm going to come to you for a moment. We've been using the phrase game and gamer. Can you talk to me about the difference? Who might identify as a gamer?
Yeah, so when it comes to advertising, I hate the word gamer. And here's why. So when you guys are buying or strategizing around your plans, when you buy TV, do you call those people that are watching TVers? When you buy radio, do you call them radioers? So when you're buying gaming, think of it more as an audience play where you can find your audience and not just gamers. Because like we said, only Gen Z really raises their hand and says, I'm a gamer, right? Nobody else does that. So to me, it's just a word that needs to be removed from the vocabulary.
Yeah, speaking of removing it, I'm actually curious to see the difference in hands. Who classifies as a gamer in this room?
This guy back here, you've raised your hand for like everything, so you must be a serious gamer.
Are you playing a game right now?
Yeah, yes, he totally is.
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. So I saw, let's call it about half the room raise their hand when I asked if you game, and I saw 3 or 4 people, would you agree, identify as a gamer. So I think one of the myths we're looking to dispel is that it's not a specific kind of person. I was also interested with the data about income brackets. So if you look at less than 50% annual income, 550 to 100K, or over 100K, it's also relatively evenly distributed. So I'll share one more statistic about who may or may not game. Doctors do game. There was a survey recently by the American Medical Association of doctors, and 60% of them agreed to having gamed. So again, when we talk about who games, we can reach those in those blue jean moments, as I believe our colleagues were talking about in the earlier panel. So we're going to test the hypothesis head on, and I want to hear from each of you on this, but I'm going to start with you, Allison. Should pharma invest in gaming? Why or why not?
I would say yes, absolutely. I think
So she is and she does.
I think for the particular, product that I was working on, where we had the opportunity to partner together, there are so many different touch points within an ecosystem, and so where and how can you find your users in ways that might be unexpected or not as crowded as other channels. And so for us, it all started with an insight. The people that we were looking to reach were more likely to be a gamer than the rest of the general population. So for us, it started with an insight. So if you're thinking about moving forward with innovation, trying to be able to expand your reach, to take advantage of customers where they are and surprise and delight them in a way that's unexpected, could be a tremendous opportunity to create an introduction for your product.
Awesome. So there's a word on the street that the three of you actually collaborated in this aspect. Kim, do you maybe want to start, and we can go down the line and talk to each of you about your roles and the case study?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Allison was alluding to, we had this insight. We were trying to reach psoriasis sufferers, and psoriasis sufferers, interestingly, are 5 times more likely to be gamers than non-psoriasis sufferers, and part of that's because a lot of times they spend time indoors. And don't want to be outside because it exacerbates their condition. But that's an interesting insight, because if they're inside, you still want to be able to engage with that audience. So obviously the audience is there, and so we said, we also started with a bit of innovation fund, trying to reach our audience in unexpected ways and to test new channels and new strategies. And so I think it was a combination, Allison, of like, what can we do that's very innovative, that the brand and actually most pharmaceutical companies had never done before, but in a space that was highly, highly relevant, that we were able to reach our audience and was measurable. And so hence the opportunity to kind of zero in on gaming occurred. And somewhere along the line, we reached out to Dave at Unity and we said, hey, we've got this idea. And we talked to a number of different partners, but I think Unity really had the package that was right for us at that time. So Dave, maybe you want to talk about what that included?
Yeah, sure. So, we basically took existing assets that were already approved, which was really important. If you guys know, it could take forever for approval. So being able to take existing assets, repackage them into an ad unit that fit our inventory, and then deliver that to a very specific audience versus a mass reach was hopefully impactful. I believe it was. But that was pretty much what we did.
Yeah. Anybody in the audience in the pharmaceutical industry? Yeah. Oh, okay. So you guys know how hard it is to get assets approved, right? Like, oh yeah, like it's interminable. It takes forever to get through PRC or MLR or LMNOP. And so that was a big deal of like making sure we could at least start with assets that we already had and that were already approved so that we didn't have to wait years in order to get it through the system.
Yeah, absolutely. So glad to see so many of my kind of people here at this event. It's absolutely possible. I think one of the things that was special about this trifecta in making what could have been impossible possible was the way that we partnered to get through that concept conversation with PRC. We went to them and said, hey, we're trying to do this not just for the sake of, being sexy, that there is a real reason that we can reach qualified diagnosed patients in these channels. We're going to be able to measure it and then work with them in a way to help them get comfortable with the concept so that they could understand that this is a brand safe opportunity. There are a lot of challenges that have come up in other channels when they were getting started that we don't have to deal with here. For example, there's no commenting in the experience that we're bringing forward. When you're bringing a social asset forward, commenting could be a really big challenge with review teams. So for us, there was a lot of opportunity to proactively address the pros and cons and bring them along in the process to co-create. And then at the end, when we were able to prove a positive ROI and through the use of our third-party measurement, identify incremental scripts coming out of this program, they got to share in that success with us, right? It was really this important collaboration that helped us to be able to prove the value of something, not just as a pilot, but something that should become core to the plans that you're putting together, right? Whether you refer to it as a tactic or a channel, everybody will have their own opinion about it, but there's always everything had to start somewhere. Social started somewhere, right? Search started somewhere, display started somewhere, and now it's block and tackle, part of many of your plans, and fully anticipate that this opportunity around gaming will become part of the block and tackle behind plans going forward.
And in my experience, you can often get approval for that initial pilot, usually under the guise of some separate innovation fund. Hey, we're trying to do something new. But if you don't have the script lift, you're never going to get it approved again. And so tying those two things is really critical. And I think the pieces of the campaign that we ran together, it included an interstitial, an actual game experience, and I think some programmatic ad buys as well.
Yeah, it was mostly rewarded video with a end card,
Yep.
that allowed the user to click through, and the playable unit was really the big piece, which I think that was like the buy-in from your side from an innovation standpoint. The playable part was coming from somewhere else, but that was the home run to getting this
Right.
over the line.
Which we launched around National Psoriasis Day.
That's correct.
So
I bet you didn't know that there's a National Psoriasis Day. Now you do.
learning so many things, Kim. One of the things that you guys talked about that I just want to pull to the forefront is measurement. So IQVIA actually did the script lift study for this case study, but there may be a myth out there about if it is measurable. Maybe Dave, can you talk to me about the programmatic side?
Yeah, I think, when people think of gaming, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily measurable, or there's perceptions of what is actually happening in the space. In mobile gaming, which is the lowest barrier of entry for any brand that's looking to get into gaming, everything is measurable, right? I think we can add pixels to any campaign and really, depending on the partner, get pretty deep insights into what the outcomes were.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Kim, I do want to talk just specifically about the agency role. Do you feel like you helped grease the wheels, and if so, how?
I mean, I hope Allison would say that. We played a strong part in that. I mean, I think the responsibility of an agency is to continually bring new ideas to their clients and try to push them probably a little before they're even ready to be pushed. And so, like anything, we're trying to continually bring new ideas, new points of view. And so that's how it really all started. We knew that we wanted to start some type of experimentation. I think that any great plan has some element of experimentation in it so that you're continually trying new things. And then, yes, it's a lot of education. So we work closely with Allison and her team to help educate. Mainly, it is kind of that PRC, that regulatory, medical, legal review process. Because anytime they're reviewing something that they've never reviewed before, there is some natural apprehension. And so just helping them understand what it is, where it's going to link, how we're going to include fair balance, and all of those really critical things is the way to eventually get the approval. And then, of course, working with other partners, other creative partners, and then Dave at Unity, like trying to kind of be the glue that holds everybody together to make sure that this kernel of an idea actually comes to fruition.
Yep, I agree with all of that.
So one more myth I'd like to try to debunk. Maybe Allison, you start, and then Kim, can you comment? Do you feel like gaming is a brand safe channel or audience?
I definitely think it is. I think each conversation for each brand at each company will be unique and different in terms of, what managing those expectations are as to where and how you'll want to participate, where and how you'll want to play. If you're a product that, is indicated for 18 and over, not a pediatric indication, you'll want to take that into consideration in terms of, where you'll be placing your advertising or reaching a particular audience. So I think it absolutely can be, having done it, but I think to get there, it's really the co-creation and that collaboration with those stakeholders to manage the expectations as to what you will and will not do, and then ultimately, once the execution is happening, continuous QA to make sure that those agreements are being upheld.
And what you can and cannot measure. So if I reflect on our lunch conversation, right, we said that there's certain things that might be more education driven. You might do a game in order to try to help everybody understand the impact of their product or diagnose a condition, versus you might want to tie a programmatic ad directly to script lift. So having realistic expectations and a common set of knowledge and terms and discussion around how you're going to prove ROI will be really important.
Yeah, that's a good point when it relates to measurement. We didn't really say this. I mean, yes, script lift at the end of the day is usually the goal, but you bring up a really valid point that you could be trying to accomplish something else. We talked a lot about using gamification for adherence or compliance. That obviously has kind of a different end goal. So I think for gaming, it really would be, you'd start it the same way you would start any campaign, with some type of measurement framework. You would determine what the important KPIs are, what the measurement and metrics that you're trying to look for, how you're going to measure, the single point of truth, not dissimilar to the way you would look at any digital advertising campaign.
And I think to go back to debunking the myth of is it brand safe or not, you have to evaluate it from a lens of or who are we targeting, and is it in mobile? Is it a streaming influencer? It's brand safe in mobile. right? And everything's rated. We talked about this earlier. PEGI ratings and the App Store have their own ratings. So we can, identify games that make the most sense, that are safe. We can remove any violent games. Like, if you want to be in a game like that, we can do that too. But when we're talking about reaching all types of consumers, the majority of what we do is in brand-safe environments. There's, again, no UGC. There's no news.
Right.
We're not scrolling away from the content to something else. So it's usually a pretty safe place to play.
Yeah. I think most pharma brands, I think I can say this pretty unilaterally, are not going to advertise in Call of Duty, right? So you can definitely set the parameters that are consistent with your brand image. And I loved what you talked about earlier, this idea of, a lot of games can be violent. There's a difference, though, between red blood and green blood. And you have to have those conversations with the brand and the advertiser and kind of assess the comfort level. Again, not dissimilar to the way that you would assess any digital campaign and the publishers that you are comfortable in running in.
Yeah, I mean, we come to you guys with an app list that makes the most sense. And we can remove anything that's not safe. And again, we work with all types of categories. So we're outside of pharma, like the Disneys of the world and the Coca-Colas of the world are buying in games. They want to be brand safe too. So there's nothing to fear in the environment.
Yeah, you were actually telling an interesting story at lunch that you worked with a toilet paper brand and how they were using it to have awareness of a new fact and feature. So it wasn't about driving purchasing, it was actually...
Only thing sexier than pharma is toilet paper.
I mean, obviously, especially the cute little swirl on Charmin, which I think was relevant. I'm actually going to turn it back to the audience for a minute. I'd like to hear from you. Why do you think pharma has not invested to date? Can you walk up to the mic if you don't mind? And tell us your favorite game before you start.
So, I've been playing the same game with the same group of people for 25 years, every Thursday night. It's built into my marriage contract. My wife, like 100% this is true.
Which one?
Yeah.
Which one?
Which one?
It's called Total Annihilation, so real-time strategy. But anyhow, so long story. I'm a gamer, for sure.
Love that.
I'm also a pharma marketer. There's two problems that we kept bumping into. So first is, it sounds like you guys built a ecosystem, which is media driving to a game which had to be downloaded. I've never seen a pharma game download, like any pharma app download actually works, so that's my one problem. So in order to get the sort of fidelity you want from a AAA game or anything interesting, you have to do that native download, and they're really hard to get in pharma. The second part is my agency works solely in oncology, and trying to convince an oncology brand that doing a game would be a great idea, I struggle, so, yeah.
Well, and that's interesting because we talked about that too. So in our case, it's not that you downloaded our game. These are games that are already downloaded and people are already playing. So you already have the built-in audience, and you're just taking advantage of the audience where they're already at.
Yeah, so I guess a little more color on Unity and what I do. We are basically running ads in games that exist already. So think of your Angry Birds, Words with Friends, Candy Crush, etc., which are already there. So we weren't actually asking the user to download a game, but the ad that ran in their game was a playable experience for the brand that we were working on. It was an interstitial, so it ran like in a rewarded moment. So users at an impasse, they need more.
So at the end of the level, you get that.
Like a little break in the game.
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of ways that you can approach gaming that we had explored in our time working together, which is, you can run advertising watching somebody game. You can run advertising in the game to reach the person who is playing actively at that moment, or you can create a gaming experience from the ground up, which we also did. We ran that in a social opportunity. And so in that case, running it in social, there's an awareness play to that, right? You're trying to intercept people when they're in their social media versus placing it in an opportunity like Unity where we are trying to reach a qualified diagnosed patient who may be further down the funnel. So there are different ways to leverage what's available today in terms of gaming options. And I think if for certain disease states or other opportunities, right, there might be different levels of sensitivity or different ways that things might show up. But I wanted to reinforce the point that you were making, which was we know that these individuals that were diagnosed were already there. And so we were, in essence, meeting them where they were with branded advertising.
Yeah.
Dave, can you actually talk for a moment about the audience quality? So when we were discussing at lunch, you said that we are sure who these audiences are, and that was interesting information.
Yeah, I mean, we work with partners who would provide us with the data to then target the audience that they want. And when doing so, we always hear that the audience quality is good. Even if there's only 10 people that they're reaching, the audience quality is good. They're engaged users, they're playing games that they enjoy, and they're not scared of the ad that they're seeing, right? So the timing of the actually functionality of our ads, the neuroscience says that we're reaching users when they want to see an ad, right? They're opting into the experience. So we do get a lot of positive feedback in that regard.
And Allison, do you think if there was an offering about DTC or HCP audiences that Pharma would buy it? Why or why not?
I definitely think that there would be. I think we'd want to make sure that we could truly assess the validity of it. I think in terms of prioritization, is the opportunity to scale there? Does it exist depending upon where that opportunity would be? And I think also just the level of investment from an asset perspective. We talked about us having a very turnkey approach by being able to reuse assets that already existed. So I think those would be some of the factors to take into consideration, but I definitely think it's possible.
Dave, do you have to create new assets for game, or can you reuse what you have?
So we used assets that we had in this case, and I think that made it faster. Obviously, you guys know your clients better than anybody. Pharma can be a little difficult sometimes when it comes to getting things approved. So this already existed, and so it was a yes before we started. So this case, yeah, this is the best way forward. But we can take any standard assets or layered PSDs, et cetera, and create an ad, a playable, an interstitial.
Another myth that was debunked for me is the fact that the content has to be net new. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think for Pharma, really any advertiser who's doing something for the very first time, it's the right way to start, right? You've got existing assets, they're approved, you can buy it programmatically, not dissimilar to other display campaigns. So in that case, you're actually using gaming essentially as another publisher or another placement. And from that point, I think you build slowly the trust of the organization and of your legal team to start to then build out custom assets and do things that are a little bit more custom with the game and with the brand.
Mm-hmm. And if you decide to go the route of creating a custom asset, which we also did, think about the reuse potential to justify the investment, or taking this big idea into a concept review with your PRC. You're creating an experience. We were talking about HCPs and blue jeans moments, right? They're consumers of content just like we are. And so if you were to create an experience that you would be leveraging in a gaming situation, is that something that you could take a step forward and bring it into a booth at a conference or a convention? Could you use it to create peer-to-peer engagement? Think about all of the possibilities to take advantage of the time and the creativity that's going into bringing an experience forward, because I think that also helps in terms of securing the approval for funds with leadership and creates more opportunities for test and learn as well.
Yeah, anytime you can kind of amortize the cost of development over multiple use cases, the better.
For sure. So Kim, we've mentioned a few words like interstitial and paid. We haven't talked about free to play. Can you break it down for me in terms of the different kinds of ways that gaming can be used?
Oh, wow. You mean in terms of the ad units?
In terms of the ad unit, yes.
Okay, so let's think about this. I mean, you can, within games, you can have your typical display ads, right? You can actually be in the game. So think about a billboard. I mean, you've always seen these types of games where essentially it's a billboard of the logo of a particular brand. So there's that type. There's interstitials that we talked about. So when there's a pause in the game, maybe you're running a short video. That could be a reward video. So if somebody actually takes the time to watch the video or to interact with the ad unit, then they earn some type of extra life or whatever in the game itself. There's more custom units and sponsorships, and that requires, again, the brand and the gaming company to work together to figure out what that might be. It could be additional product placement. So really any type of ad unit, digital ad unit that you can think of, it can be applied to gaming. I mean, you could certainly buy ads immediately adjacent to the game so that they're not actually integrated into the game, but you're taking advantage of the audience while they're playing. I'm sure there are some that I have forgotten.
Yeah, gaming is huge, and you can do a lot of different things. I specifically work in the mobile gaming space, but if you look at gaming as an ecosystem, right, the panel here is about gaming in general. It's more than just that, right? So we're talking about influencers, and we're talking about, esports teams.
Right.
Like, there's a lot out there. But for Pharma, I think it's really, you want to be where you can get in, and that's the lowest barrier of entry, which is mobile gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good point, because there are so many gaming influencers, and there are certainly companies out there that rep those gaming influencers. And so if you're looking for I'm going to do kind of the quote unquote, because I guess it depends on your definition of celebrity, but if you're looking for a gaming celebrity, then obviously there's an opportunity to associate your brand with that particular gamer and that influencer for the same type of product kind of placement and product discussion that you would in any other influencer environment.
I would actually ask you to remove the air quotes. I was doing some thinking and some research on gaming influencers. The guy Dream from Minecraft, he has 31 million followers on YouTube.
There's no air quotes necessary.
Yeah,
for
and
that, I suppose.
2.3 million.
That's like legit celebrity.
On Instagram, 2.3 million. Like that's I have 23 followers on Instagram.
Yeah,
So.
and I mean, in esports too, you can have all sorts of sponsorships, individual players, you can sponsor teams, you can sponsor actual events. I mean, the possibilities are really just limitless.
And we were talking at lunch specifically as well, if you can find an influencer that has the condition, right, that's an option.
In pharma, I think for a lot of other advertising categories as well, authenticity is so important. And so anytime we are trying to look for a celebrity endorser, it's really critical for us that they actually have the condition, have experience with the condition, better yet, have experience with the brand and managing the condition. Because what we find is that if they don't, then they can't talk authentically, credibly about their brand experience, and then their followers see right through it. And it can actually result in a bit of a backlash, because then it feels inauthentic. The audience feels like they're being sold to. I think you all probably know that experience. Allison, what do you think?
I completely agree. I think it's really important to make sure that anybody that you're going to partner with, one, I think tied to the condition, whether it's that they themselves suffer with it, or perhaps they're a caregiver of it, or someone in their family was deeply impacted, is really important. Two, you want to make sure that it's going to be on brand and in line with what you're trying to bring forward, in terms of your campaign. And then lastly, what are the expectations for this partnership as well? I think oftentimes these are opportunities that are perceived as very costly. And so I think being able to manage the expectations out of pursuing an influencer partnership, is it for awareness, right? That's probably not a place where you're going to be looking for an impact on new patient starts or incremental scripts, right? What role is it playing in terms of the touch points?
Right, much more kind of indirectly measured. We were talking about measurement before. I mean, clearly the value of that is much more difficult to measure, although I would argue that it can be done.
Next year's panel will be on influencers.
And measurement.
And I do think that the authenticity thing is super important. And if you're going to go that route of working with an influencer or being somewhere where you're meeting the gamers in a place where they don't expect to see you, then you need to be persistent and consistent. Because if you give up and move away from them, then they're going to be really upset, and they're going to see that you came and left, right? So again, that works for KFC and it works for Mountain Dew, because they've been doing it. They have a gaming strategy. It's not just like, this is something that we think we want to do, let's take a stab at it. They invested time and money into becoming part of their users' lives.
Yeah. So speaking of that time and money, can you share a little bit about the size of the advertising market for gaming?
So the gaming market right now is, I believe the number that I saw was $1.25 billion. But there's still a delta between time spent and dollars spent in gaming. So there's a big opportunity for you guys to get in front of users, and as gaming grows, the delta grows. So, I mean, there's lots of opportunities, and I think, I think the number that I saw was 40% was growth from an advertiser's dollar for this coming year in gaming. They want to grow 40%, which is still not going to get us to 100%. match.
The short answer is the market is not as big as Dave thinks that it should be, right?
Well, yeah, I'm biased, but
After this panel, it will be.
But there is this, there's this inconsistency versus other media channels in terms of how much ad spending is in the space versus how much people are actually using the content. So if you were to compare it to something like television, for example, it's like way out of whack. People are spending much more time with gaming relative to the amount of ad spend versus television.
And television's actually a really interesting one because viewership is going down, but ad spend is not going down as similarly to viewership.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's shifting, and that might be a whole other panel on how do you define television, because I think we still think of it as a linear TV, and for the most part, I mean, yes, a large part of it is still bought linearly, but increasingly it's bought more digitally as well.
And I was actually interested when I was looking at Xbox and Netflix started up a gaming aspect, right? And similarly, if you look at like a Samsung or an OG smart TV, they actually connect into the platforms. You don't need to buy the console anymore. I reflect on, I'm aging myself now, but when I got married and we moved in together, me and my husband, he said, I really want a new Xbox, but I can't justify the hundreds of dollars. That's not the case anymore.
No, it's all built into smart televisions.
For sure. So I'm going to take us in the next few minutes a bit forward and look at and think about trends. So we talked about the trends of the gaming market specifically as it grows and the ad spend grows. Let's also, and we talked about the definition of a celebrity, but what about who a physician is and the trends in physicians' age and sex, and not even just physicians, but healthcare providers specifically? Allison, do you want to maybe start there?
Yeah, for sure. I think first and foremost, as we see new providers coming out of their graduating classes and other providers moving into their retirement years, the folks that are coming up that will be taking care of us as we age are all digital natives, right? They have grown up in the age of social and all of these channels being present. They were born into a phase where, you know, everybody having a mobile phone was a typical thing, right? Instead of like calling your friend's house and, you know, having to talk to their parents before you could get somebody on the phone. So I think being able to prioritize the channels and the platforms and the places where they consume their content and where they participate, I think is going to be really important as prioritizations are made in terms of budget allocation.
And we were also talking about the physician's assistants and nurse practitioners and that trend. I met with Lilly a couple months ago, and they were looking in psoriasis, which is a therapeutic area we had talked about earlier. 25 to 30% of their writers are PAs and NPs. Those skew younger, so they probably also skew more likely to game and be reached as an audience on that platform. And you can get brands as much as another Lilly brand, Taltz 36%, NPs and PAs, and Illumient 32%. So let's actually turn to the audience for a minute. Are there any trends that you guys think could positively or negatively impact the uptick of gaming in pharma?
While you're all thinking.
Or gaming.
Or gaming there, yes. I think in general, one of the largest trends is obviously usage is going up, ad spend is going up. I think with the two of those things, advertisers in general are going to get more comfortable with gaming as an investment of their media dollars. And so you're just going to see an increased proliferation of advertisers within gaming. All of the things that we talked about before still hold. You know, it's got to be authentic. It can't be an irritating experience within the game because you're going to turn your audience off. But I think increasingly we're going to see more and more advertisers, including pharma, get comfortable with the idea of investing there.
Dave, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, from a trend perspective, and we talked about this, you know, we've already sort of seen a saturated market in regard to ads in mobile. Like, that's a place where they're already existing, almost too many, in some people's opinion. But it's console, I think, is where the next kind of like step is for advertising in games, because we now download our games to our consoles or our TVs, right? So it's no longer a cartridge, everything's uploaded, and then you're refreshing that. And that's where ads can come in a big way. So I think Unity is trying to solve that with our partners at PlayStation and Xbox, et cetera. But it's certainly a place of growth.
Yeah, so historically, when you're talking about console gaming, the only way to really have an advertiser within those games is for it to be hard-coded within the game. And so think about the approval process for something like that, and it can't ever be changed. But now, to Dave's point, that they're being downloaded and then being refreshed, you can update the advertising, you can change out the billboards that you're watching as you're driving the car. You can change the cars themselves. We were talking about some really cool opportunities within the automotive industry, where if you are launching a new car brand, you have the opportunity to update the game and interact with a new car. So I think, again, I think that opportunities are going to be vast in terms of how you can interact with different games. And right now, consoles, I mean, I think it's only like 10% of quote-unquote gamers are using consoles, or maybe if you look at kind of the difference versus 90% on mobile. And so mobile very saturated, but with more and more people turning towards consoles, I mean, even the definition, as we've pointed out, is going to evolve because it's no longer like a cartridge game. It's being downloaded. I think there's going to be more and more opportunities for advertisers.
So it's funny that you use the word saturated, because a colleague of mine that we all know, who is supposed to be with us today, Jared, he actually did a little study on his own desktop. He did UC research for nothing but a week. I
have to tell I mean, I know we had a lot of pharma brand people in here, but you might have to tell them what UC is, because I'm not sure that just like, I don't know, do you guys go around talking about ulcerative colitis? I can't even say it. Yeah. Colitis the way that we do?
Yeah, it's a gastrointestinal condition, ulcerative colitis. The idea is he didn't have it, but he was kind of trying to figure out, could I get there? He games very regularly, and he said, on search, on WebMD, on a variety of channels, if I read nothing but UC research for a week, am I going to get served an ad? It took 11 days, and it was one ad, and it wasn't even a brand ad. So I think there's this kind of invisible barrier that has existed to date for pharma. So it's saturated, I think, in a lot of other markets, but not necessarily
I think
for
it's
pharma.
saturated in terms of the audience market. In other words, a lot of the audience is using mobile games, but in terms of advertisers, I think you're absolutely right. There's a ton of white space, which is why I think for advertisers like Allison, it's very, very attractive, because in some of these categories, like you see, like psoriasis, that are, you've got heavy competition. It's really hard to find any type of white space. And so going to gaming, in this particular case, was one of those opportunities. Nobody else had ever done it. Nobody in our category had done it. Very few pharma advertisers had ever done it. So she had an opportunity to be first to market, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, we were actually picked up by Adweek for our work. We also won 2 Shorty Awards for our opportunity and leadership in pharma. So I think as more people kind of jump in the pool, so to speak, I think with that is going to create more competition. There'll be more innovation. There'll be more opportunities coming up. There are going to be different formats or different ways to show up in gaming, that we're not, talking about or looking to leverage today. So I think we're on the cusp of something really special.
I mean, think about this. I mean, in our category, you've got competitors that are literally spending $100 million in television. And if you're not one of the big pharma companies, you're not spending hundreds of millions of dollars. So where are you going to find a place that they're not? You actually have to be much, much more creative and look harder for those opportunities. And I think we were really lucky to uncover the opportunity that we did.
For sure. For sure. So there's one more trend that I want to talk about before we turn to the audience for questions, and you guys better get more talkative than you've been to date. Allison, I just want to make sure we covered all the barriers at pharma. I feel like there can be a lot of red tape, white tape, things to overcome. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you feel like you guys needed to?
Yeah, I think the considerations, if you're going to explore something like this or engage your concept teams on, is really being able to ground them in the why you're doing this. I think that's really important for us. It was an insight. There was white space, a wide open opportunity for us to be able to participate. 2, I think getting them on board, you need to be able to help them to understand what that user experience is. How are they going to come into contact with your brand? The before, during, and after. We can't assume that everybody's fluent in what we're bringing forward, and so I think being able to help them understand how it's all going to work will be really important. 3rd, the targeting and making sure that you can prioritize that that you're going to go after, who you're saying you're going after. And then lastly, your ability to measurement or quantify the impact of what you're doing.
And then it's got to work.
It will.
And that you can measure it and prove it through IQVIA ROI.
Which we did.
Which we did.
Yep. So I'm just going to do a quick summary, and maybe, Kim, if you can help me on the things that I missed, and then I'll turn to you guys for questions. So there's so many different ways to look at gaming in terms of audiences, in terms of different ad formats, in terms of different amounts of white space. We talked about the fact that it's a growing market. We talked about the fact that it's a diverse population, and that you can overcome some of these barriers, like the nasty words of MLR. We debunked some myths about doctors do game, about it being brand safe, and it being measurable. What did I miss?
Oh, let's see. I mean, if you've got the myth that it's not where your audience is at, you're wrong. I think that we definitely dispelled that myth that just about every American is interacting with some type of game. So the audience is definitely there. I think we talked about kind of the crawl, walk, run approach. I mean, you can use existing assets, helps you get through regulatory, and then as you get more comfortable, there's a limitless opportunity to really develop great engagement with different brands, different games, build your own games. And so it's a great opportunity to build community, build engagement, build brand affinity, and ultimately, in our case, increase scripts.
Dave, if you could tell the audience, specifically brands, one thing about gaming, what would it be?
It works.
Allison?
Have no fear.
Kim?
Start now?
And on that note, I'd like to turn to you guys. What questions do you have? Do you mind coming to the mic? I'm sorry, I know that's a lot of steps, but we can handle it. And don't forget to tell us your favorite game.
Oh yeah, so my favorite right now is Kingdoms Come Deliverance 2, RPG, very cool, super interesting. But the question is more on the streaming, like smart TV, like as a guy, on the cloud gaming that you don't need like a console anymore.
Right.
It's all subscription based. Is it like an option for advertisers because like it's really vast, like amount of customers really start to use it? Maybe you know more, like what advertising options are available.
Within streaming, specifically?
Exactly, yes. Smart TV streaming, no console, and this, all the stuff, yeah.
Dave, I think that's questions for you.
Yeah, I think the work that Samsung's trying to do right now with their store and with their cloud gaming is probably going to be the first iteration of where ads can come in. I don't think we're there yet. They definitely are using the same sort of like builds on the Unity platform that they do for the other operating systems. So there will be ads. I just don't know when they'll come into play.
Another question on the like how to define audience for this, like demographics, like age groups, it's all the same like in web and other channels, or it's different? What's the difference?
So there's a bunch of ways that we do that. Unity has our own audience hub, so we're evaluating our own data, looking at that. We also work with Experian. We work with Data AI, which is basically like the ComScore for in-app, and they've got audience demo and age, and then again, games are funny, right? You could build a game and you think that a certain demographic is going to play it, and then the reality is that somebody else plays it. Like think about the Smurfs game, which might be for kids. It's super nostalgic and it's played by people my age. So it's difficult to defer, but we have some pretty interesting signals that give us the audience.
And we can use IQVIA Health data as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The targetability is pretty consistent. So you can target demographically, you can target contextually. So if there's a particular ad that you want your brand or a particular game you want your ad associated with, behaviorally. So what type of purchases are people making in game? And then what's really important to us is do they have the condition or don't they? And so it does vary by provider, but a company like Unity working with IQVIA or CrossX, it's definitely doable.
I don't have a favourite game. I actually don't game. I love Monopoly and card games, so I'm not an online gamer.
Monopoly Go is the most played game on mobile.
Okay. I'll have to check that out because I love Monopoly. I think you might have already covered it, but what is the main reason that to date it hasn't been used in pharma advertising?
Allison, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think there's always the fear of the unknown, the heavy lift of how do I get my boss to support the funding to do this, or we'll never get that through PRC. PRC is not your enemy. They are your friends. Their goal is to help you get to yes and do it in a way that is safe and compliant and hopefully prevents you from getting a letter. So I think some of it is just navigating the unknown. And so when Kristen said to me, what's your thought? I'm like, have no fear. Like whatever it is, there will be ways to overcome it, right? I'm sure the same thing happened the first time you had to set up a Facebook page, right? Or an Instagram profile for one of your brands, right? You have to start somewhere, and I think it's just having the commitment and the funding and the open conversations and let the data drive, how appropriate it is for your brand.
I think part of it too is that digital in general, and particularly kind of emerging channels like gaming, from a regulatory standpoint, it's not as clear as more established channels.
Right.
And so people know on television what they can do and what they can't do. And even that is changing, right? But within these kind of emerging channels, even the regulatory environment is very uncertain, which makes lawyers even more tentative in terms of what they will approve.
I'd also add specifically status quo bias and comfort as two key contributing factors to what Allison was saying. Go ahead.
Yes, so with digital therapeutics coming in and reimbursing in 2026, what do you see the play is for both advertisement in that, being games associated with it, and then also, and this is a question for Dave, or Unity getting into that area as well?
Do you want to start with digital therapeutics and then you on the ad side of things?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I have a position on the digital therapeutics. I think there's going to be opportunities, no doubt. And I think when it comes to gaming, I think there's a natural connection.
Yeah, I think, the use case is there. I think it's just going to have to be matured. I truly don't know. Unity doesn't have a position on it. As of right now, I think there may be a part of Unity is a massive company, right? So there could be a team that works on the industry side that is working on that, but the programmatic mobile ad space, we're not focused on that right now.
I also think there's a lot of regulatory unknowns with digital therapeutics, and that will probably have a factor as well.
Okay, hello, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Just a quick overview, I'm from Brazil, and I would like to question one thing, because in Brazil we can't do ads promotion about products for general public, only for HCPs.
Right.
So my question is, how do you identify and map game influencers who are most relevant to HCPs? And also, what criteria do you use to ensure their credibility and alignment with medical audiences?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you have an answer to that? I can tell you how I would approach it, but I've never been in that experience specifically. I mean, there are companies that do nothing but represent influencers and gaming influencers at that. And so that's where I would probably start in helping to identify the HCPs that really specialize in your particular therapeutic area.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of that. And to build on that, you want to make sure that they're going to have the scale of the following that you're looking for. What types of content do they create on their own, and is that consistent with where your brand wants to go, or what type of voice you're looking for? We were chatting at lunch earlier about a gaming opportunity that I worked on in a previous life in another disease state, in the mental health space, where physicians are asked to do a math problem or a word puzzle of some kind, and then they're put through a gaming simulation of schizophrenia, so hearing voices. And so we look at the scores or how fast they completed something in their regular state, and then in the state of being subject to having like a schizophrenic episode, and you can watch the audience scores just plummet. So that's just one example of, I think, how HCP gaming was leveraged for us. In that case, it did not involve an influencer, but I think there are opportunities to bring tactics like that together.
I think there's also another dimension we didn't cover a lot today. We focused, I think, on the commercial side of the business, but if you think about medical and educating HCPs, there's also an opportunity there in games and in gamification, right? So I actually read an interesting study from Beth Israel about surgeons and how surgeons who gamed and specifically used like handheld devices had fewer errors, had 47% better scores on their surgical skills. So I think that you should think about a lot of dimensions of gaming, from gamification to education, and then to influencers and how they can impact.
Thank you.
And if you happen to have surgery, you should probably ask your surgeon
Do you
if he
game?
or she is a gamer.
Hi, my name is Amy. Play a lot of mobile games. One of my favorite games right now is actually by one of my students. It's called InBody, and it's like she created it during COVID-19, and it's about kind of like restorative inside the body, these kingdoms that she's restoring.
Oh,
It was
very
very
cool.
But my question, so I work for a nonprofit that focuses on game development as a like pathway for transferable skills and all of that. And like when we were working with the students in high school, we really want to focus on the fact that like, yeah, there are maybe jobs at AAA game studios, but there are also opportunities in automotive and pharma. So I wanted to ask you, and we use Unity. I should have mentioned that.
Excellent.
It's urban arts.
Good plug.
High five, Dave.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you what kind of advice might you have for students who are looking into these types of opportunities in gamification and creating games and creating interactive experiences in pharma and health?
Do you want to start that one?
I mean, I can't speak to just pharma and health. I can speak to the industry as a whole. I think obviously it's growing, and there are jobs for everybody coming out of school in gaming. I mean, gaming, you can build your own game, you can do it yourself, or you can go work for a AAA publisher, you can go work for a developer like Rovio. There's a lot of opportunities in engineering and building like that.
Yeah, it's great. Or marketing in general. I mean, it's not a bad word, right? And so I think as marketing and advertising professionals lean in towards channels like gaming, I think there's an opportunity for people who are passionate about that type of space to get experience in more kind of traditional marketing and advertising roles within pharma, within automotive, at agencies, at media agencies in particular.
Like Butler Till.
You can send your students to me. I'll hire them.
Kim. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'll say a sincere thank you to my panelists. It's been so great spending time with you today, and thank you to our audience for listening.
And thank you to our
Thanks,
moderator.
everybody. Yes, thank you, Kristen.